Hello, my name is Richard Pywell from the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. I'd like to introduce my co-authors, Jeff Ollerton, Pinar Yilmazer, Michael Below and Thomas Schuh. Today I'm going to talk about a project to develop a strategy and actions for biodiversity conservation on European railways. It's well known that railways are one of the safest and most sustainable forms of transport. This is due to their low carbon footprint, minimal pollution, and the relatively small area of land they require per person transported compared to other forms of transport. For these and other reasons, it's likely that railways will become increasingly important in the future. However, railways can be both a hazard and a benefit to wildlife. The primary hazard being the risk of collision of wildlife with trains and other railway infrastructure, and the primary benefits being that railways provide habitat for many species, and there is also their important role in reconnecting landscapes through their role as a green corridor. I'd like to take a few moments just to introduce the REVERSE project to you. REVERSE stands for the Ecological Effects of Railways on Biodiversity. This project is a collaboration between 17 rail operators across Europe and ecologists. The aim of the project is to develop a shared vision for railways and biodiversity and to publish a series of goals and actions to support biodiversity. The project is underpinned by a series of case studies demonstrating innovative practices that the rail companies undertake to manage biodiversity. And we also undertook a survey of current priorities, skills and actions that the rail companies undertake. These are the 13 strategic goals and actions for biodiversity from the REVERSE project, and the full details of the report are provided in the link below. And for the remainder of my talk, I'm going to focus on the key recommendations from the report. So the first recommendation is that we bring about cultural change in the rail industry by ensuring that biodiversity is embedded at every level of the business alongside safety, performance and sustainability. And in the case study below, Deutsche Bahn, the German rail operator, has been very effective in engaging with biodiversity planning and strategy making at the national and local levels through its mapping of protected sites in accordance with federal laws and policies, its digitising of biodiversity data to make this available, and its training of staff and employees in environmental matters, and the comprehensive guidance it provides on biodiversity management. A further recommendation the report made was the need for rail companies to acquire specialist skills and capabilities in ecology in order to fully understand biodiversity and how best to manage these assets. In our survey, we found that around 75% of European rail companies employ professional ecologists, which is great, but we also recognise the need to build competencies at all levels of the business. And this included the need for specialist skills and training in things such as regulatory frameworks and standards for ecology, habitat management, monitoring biodiversity, and then data management and reporting for biodiversity. And in the case study on the right, OBB, the Austrian rail operator, undertakes comprehensive training for its staff in railway ecology, and it also works effectively with local school children on educational projects, including afforestation. A further recommendation of the REVERSE project was the need for rail companies to value biodiversity and other natural assets. And the first step towards achieving this is the need for comprehensive audits of habitats and biodiversity on the line-side estate. And to do this, we undertook an analysis of the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, GBIF, and the data that it holds. And we analysed the rail network and found that over 3,000 rare and threatened species occur within 1 kilometre of European railways, which is a large and important number of species. We also did an analysis to demonstrate the role of the rail network in connecting forest habitats across Europe, and this map demonstrates that forest connectivity. To do this, what we did was we analysed land cover data showing the distribution and location of forests, and then we overlaid that with the rail network, and we created a simple connectivity index where green are rail routes which have high connectivity, connecting forest fragments together, and red is low connectivity. A further recommendation from the report was the need for consistent and repeatable approaches to biodiversity monitoring. And these are key for setting detailed baselines for biodiversity from which to measure change, and also for measuring management outcomes and setting ambitious targets for biodiversity into the future. And in the case study below, Network Rail, the UK rail operator, has combined high-resolution satellite data with LiDAR data. LiDAR data is airborne laser scanning to provide detailed vegetation canopy models, and Network Rail has brought these data sets together to create a detailed 3D map of habitats present in the rail corridor and the surrounding landscape. And in another case study, CEH worked with Network Rail to develop automated biodiversity monitoring systems using computer vision and bioacoustic technologies to monitor biodiversity. And these are very valuable because they mean that employees don't need to venture onto the line side to collect these data and thereby risk their personal safety. A further recommendation is that it's important that rail companies limit negative impacts of railway development on biodiversity. And this is through the consistent implementation of the mitigation hierarchy, which is shown below. So the hierarchy basically means that if at all possible, you should avoid negative impacts on biodiversity caused by development. And if you can't avoid them, you should minimize them or reduce them. And if these can't be minimized further, then they need to be mitigated by the restoration of habitats for biodiversity. And in addition, if these can't be mitigated, then they need to be offset through compensation through the creation of habitats. And in the case study example on the right, Network Rail in the UK needed to undertake significant re-engineering of embankments on the line side due to landslides. And this resulted in the destruction of habitat for the rare large blue butterfly. So in order to offset this effect on the large blue butterfly, the habitat was translocated to a new site. And in addition, Network Rail undertook a large program of habitat creation for the butterfly to provide net gain for this rare species. The final recommendation is the need for rail companies to set ambitious targets for biodiversity and then regularly monitor progress towards these targets through monitoring. Now, this will require quantifiable and verifiable measures of species and habitats. It will also require regular and easy to interpret reports, and these reports will be very important for stakeholder engagement and wider communication with neighbours. And then the report also worked with rail operators from across Europe to develop a series of example high-level performance indicators for biodiversity and appropriate benchmarks. And these are published in the report as ways that rail companies could make this commitment to biodiversity. And in the case study example provided on the right, Network Rail in the UK again, this is their biodiversity action plan, and this commits Network Rail to no net loss of biodiversity on their line-side estate by 2024, moving towards net gain for biodiversity by 2035. And for this innovative approach to biodiversity management and this commitment, Network Rail was awarded a prize at the International Sustainable Railway Awards in 2022. So, by way of conclusion, the Reverse project has brought together 17 rail operators from across Europe with ecologists, and together we've developed a shared vision for railways and biodiversity across the European continent. And the report has made a series of important findings and recommendations. One of the key findings is the important role that railways have in providing habitats for wildlife, and their great potential going forward as green corridors to reconnect our fragmented landscapes. In terms of recommendations, the report recommends that negative impacts of rail development should always be mitigated using the mitigation hierarchy. And this is also underpinned by the wealth of practical knowledge on how best to manage biodiversity provided in the case studies from the rail company and other partners in the project. And finally, The report emphasises the importance of monitoring biodiversity. This is important for providing comprehensive baselines of biodiversity from which to measure change, for measuring the effectiveness of management and its outcomes, and for setting ambitious targets for biodiversity going forward into the future. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm very happy to answer questions on the Reverse project. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Richard. We have time for a few questions. Yes, Toyn? There is a microphone coming.
Thank you very much, Richard, for your nice presentation. I was wondering, one question, how did you set the goals on strategic level? You told us about no net loss in 2030 and some gains in 2035. How did you set these goals on the government level?
So thank you for your question. So these goals need to be set at the individual country level. We realised in the project we weren't going to be able to set a goal, a unified goal across the whole of Europe, and the different circumstances for different countries mean that it's really impossible. But what we have tried to do is present exemplars of what we should be trying to achieve for biodiversity using the case studies. So in answer to your question, we didn't formally set goals for biodiversity, performance indicators in the way that it would be great, but it's just not possible given the different legislative frameworks and requirements of the different rail operators.
Thank you. More questions? So thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to read the report. I haven't done it yet, but I think it's good that you developed this joint vision. I'm really looking forward to learn more about that. Thank you, Richard. Then the next speaker will be... Oh, sorry.